Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council to order. Our clerk will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. The first item is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. For late items, it is additions to the procedural motion, Section 91C of the Community Charter, subsection E and I.
Thank you very much. Given we are scheduled to go in camera, I'd ask for procedural motion to proceed in camera. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. It's an event I don't want him to miss. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 5th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192, governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding mass gathering events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, yes?
Thank you, Worship. There are no late items, but I just wanted to note that Councillor Brown is on the phone attending, and for some reason we're not able to see him up on the screen, so I'm just reaching out to Councillor Brown that if he wishes to speak, that he speak out to let us know.
We won't regard it as rude, Councillor Brown, should you raise your voice. It's perfectly permissible, particularly from a young father who's probably got a lot of training in that. The next item is the introduction of late items, and we have none. A motion for approval of the agenda. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour, motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Martman, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favour, motion carries. On to the Mayor's report. For those who have lived in Nanaimo for a while or who are familiar with its history, many of you will remember that last Wednesday, September 30th, 60 years ago, was the horrible Chinatown fire, as it was known. Chinese came to this community first in the 1860s to work in the mines and establish businesses. By 1911, Nanaimo's third and largest Chinatown was well established in the Pine and Hecate Street areas. The community had a population of approximately 1,500, which would swell on weekends when Chinese workers came from surrounding areas to socialize and purchase supplies. And the non-Chinese population also frequented Chinatown for commercial and entertainment purposes. It consisted of what were several shack-like structures that had been moved from previous Chinatown location settlements, which spanned 8 acres at this location. And I can tell you that at one point, Nanaimo had the third largest Chinatown on the west coast of North America, a little historic fact. Unfortunately, in the afternoon of September 30th, 1960, fire broke out in Chinatown. It raged for 7 hours, and despite the best efforts of the Nanaimo Fire Department and the volunteer-based Harewood Fire Department, they were unable to control the flames, and nearly all of those structures were destroyed. At that point in Nanaimo's history, that meant that roughly 200 people, mainly seniors, were without homes. And they were mainly seniors because so many of them speak to that ugly part of Canadian history. These were men mainly who weren't able, because of the racist laws and the head tax, to bring spouses from China, and or, if they had spouses, or bring brides to British Columbia. Buildings and shops of cultural and historical significance were lost forever. It was never rebuilt. It was a major incident in this community's history. It was, after all, the Chinese who had played a very important role in building Nanaimo, and they had struggled against incredible obstacles. I think, as many of you know, and maybe some of the younger people who are hopefully listening to Council tonight won't know, but will learn and not forget this. It wasn't until 1948 in this province that British Columbians of Chinese, Japanese, or South Asian or Indigenous descent got the vote, the right to vote in provincial elections. For Councillors Turley and Thorpe and myself, that's pretty close in terms of where we are in age, and it seems hard to believe now. And one of the reasons we mention the Chinatown fire is not just to reflect on this community's history, but also to move into a very important thing which was driven home today by an incident in our community, and that is that it is Fire Prevention Week, October 4th to 10th. And the theme this year is Serve Up Safety, Fire Safety in the Kitchen. And the reason I bring that up is because this afternoon in the 300 block of Pine Street, a structure with a working smoke alarm, thank goodness, alerted everyone, and the fire services were able to attend and put out the fire, and importantly, save a dog who was locked in the premises. I can tell you that after gaining entry, firefighters discovered an unattended cooking that had been left on the stove and no occupants in the home. 26% of residential fires start in the kitchen. So, a little lesson for all of us this week as we celebrate Fire Prevention Week, and let's try and exercise some safety. I want to talk briefly about the city recreation facilities following province-wide COVID-19 safety protocols. While most of our recreation facilities are open and operating, staff are continuing to adapt, adjust, and learn as a result of the ongoing changes to health and safety requirements as a result of the pandemic. Whether it's policy or rules or directions or orders, our staff are having to constantly adapt and change how our facilities are operated. The safety protocols and procedures in the recreation facilities are there to ensure that the city is in compliance with provincial health orders, and procedures have been put in place to meet the physical distancing requirements and mass gatherings of a maximum of 50 people. I can tell you that as these things are changing fairly regularly, our staff is in constant consultation with other communities and officials in this province to try and ensure that proper compliance is in fact observed. I appreciate the frustration that has been expressed by several correspondents with the Mayor and Council and/or city staff. These are difficult and frustrating times for many people. But please keep in mind these rules are there to ensure public health and safety, and it is by kindness and cooperation and good manners and respect for one another that these rules will be most effectively utilized and implemented to protect the public's health and safety of all of us. On another note, it is Foster Family Month in British Columbia. As many of you know, there is a rather strong correlation between children who have been in foster care and most particularly Indigenous children, who form the majority of children in foster care in this province, a connection between them and many of our homeless in this province. And homelessness and mental health and addiction issues continue to be the #1 issue in our community. And so as we celebrate Foster Family Month in British Columbia, if you know foster parents who have taken on the difficult task of raising other people's children, who are often placed in foster care, not necessarily because their parents are inadequate in terms of their parenting skills, but we are coming to recognize and also acknowledge because the children themselves have suffered some form of trauma or have some issues that make it very difficult for anyone to parent them. So we're going to salute foster parents this month in our community who take on these great challenges and try and provide decent homes for children who require care who otherwise wouldn't be able to receive it. Because if we fail, and foster families fail, and we as a community fail, then we simply contribute to the human misery we see on our streets and in our community and across this country on a daily basis. Finally, I want to finish on a happy note. Good of the order. Julie Bevan was recognized for her work in a category called Above and Beyond at the 2020 Nanaimo Business Awards ceremonies. She is our Manager of Culture and Events. She was formerly the Executive Director at the Nanaimo Art Gallery and left that position to take up a newly created role with the city in March of this year. She joined when organizational restructuring led by the city's Cultural Services section to move from and form Parks, Recreation and Culture, Mr. Harding's much bigger shop now. So we want to offer our congratulations to Julie, but also reflect on the fact that she chose public service, which I think needs to be recognized. So well done, Julie. And that is it for the Mayor's report. We have no presentations, Ms. Gurry. Committee minutes are simply to be received. No motion is required. We have no consent items. We have no delegations, and we are on to reports. Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Ms. Legan, our General Manager of Corporate Services, please.
Council. We have three reports from the Finance Group, 12A, 12B, 12C. I'm going to turn the mic over to Ms. Mercer. So we also have 4 additional staff here to speak to the details and specifics, so we'd like to move it along.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mercer, welcome. It's always fun to talk about asking for money.
Yeah, that's right. This is a fun topic. We're looking for money. So thank you, Your Worship, for having me here tonight. The city has an opportunity to apply for grant funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program under the Clean BC Communities Funding Stream. So just a bit of a background before I get into the grant on our process of how we go about choosing projects. Then we have historically followed this process. And the first step is once we're notified of a grant, the finance team organizes a group meeting with GMs and directors, and select directors and perhaps managers, depending on what type of grant it is. And this group gets together and sits around and decides which projects that we have that align with the qualifications or the criteria of the grant. And once this group recommends the projects for council to choose from, based on the criteria, finance writes the report and usually co-presents with someone who knows the details of each of the projects being put forward. And then once council chooses a grant or a project or projects, finance completes the application and submits. And then we wait for notification that we have been successful or unsuccessful in the grant. So that's just a bit of how we go through our process. And if you want feedback, to give us feedback on that, we're more than happy to have that. This stream helps, this Clean BC Communities stream helps fund infrastructure projects that support the management of renewable energy, access to clean energy transportation, improved energy efficiency of buildings, and the generation of clean energy. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Miller and Mr. Paminger to give a presentation that will provide you with detailed information about this grant stream and the 2 projects that have been put forward.
Good evening and welcome.
Hi. Stand first. Hello. So I'm Michelle Miller. I'm a senior financial analyst, and I'm here to talk to you about the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Grant Program. This is the Clean BC Communities Fund stream. It's going to sound pretty similar to the grant program that you were presented a couple weeks ago because it's the same overall grant program, just a different stream of it. This is the Clean BC, and the last one you were presented was the Community Culture and Recreation Infrastructure stream. So some of the details might sound fairly similar. So as Laura mentioned, this focuses on projects that support the management of renewable energy, access to clean energy transportation, improved energy efficiency of buildings, and the generation of clean energy. The provincial and federal government have committed about $47 million towards this program. This is the second intake that they've done for it. It's grant funding up to a maximum of 73.33% of the total project cost. And stacking rules apply. So what that means is the 26.67% that we are responsible for cannot come from another form of government funding. So it can't come from our gas tax community fund or another grant. Okay, so to be eligible, projects must be for the broad public use or benefit, and they must result in a measurable reduction of greenhouse gas emissions as compared to a baseline for that infrastructure. It goes on with some detail about new infrastructure, but we haven't proposed any new infrastructure projects. So, to be eligible, projects must increase the capacity to manage renewable energy. That's managing, distributing, and controlling renewable energy, energy infrastructure that transmits and makes better use of renewable energy. Example of that would be like geothermal heat. The second one is increase access to clean energy transportation. That would be improving the ability to utilize clean energy to power vehicles. So an example would be charging infrastructure at public facilities. The third one is energy efficiency of buildings, which is pretty much exactly that. So HVAC upgrades, window upgrades. And the fourth one is generation of clean energy, which would be production and generation of clean energy, resulting in GHG savings, not necessarily cost savings. And an example of that would be heat recovery. The project must be completed within the first 5 years of being approved, and the application deadline for this is November 12th. So we have come up with 2 projects to present to you today. One of them is Oliver Woods Community Center hot water boiler replacement and mechanical upgrades, and the other one is Bevan Park Leisure Pool air handling units, and both of these would fall under the increased energy efficiency of public buildings. So I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Paminger, who's going to explain these projects in a little bit more detail. He's the Manager of Infrastructure, Planning, and Energy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to present the second phase of this presentation, Your Worship and Council. So these 2 projects in front of you there, we've actually had assessments and condition assessments and studies done on both of these, as well as what's called low carbon electrification opportunities reviewed. And so this slide here is just a picture showing Oliver Woods Community Center, and to the right is a standard efficiency natural gas boiler, which is used in the facility for heating hot water as well as peak demands of space heating. So the replacement of the natural gas boiler, this is recommended to be replaced with natural gas. And like I mentioned, it's actually used for hot water heating as well as space heating. And there will be some modifications to the piping and the valves and that sort of thing that go along with this project. So those are included in replacement of the boiler as well. And the benefits that are associated with going with an electric boiler over natural gas is it will reduce about 90% or more of the facility's greenhouse gas emissions. And electric boilers actually have a longer life than natural gas boilers that burn natural gas. And if the grant application is successful, the project can proceed with no additional investment required by the city. And financial details. The estimated total cost is about $116,000, and the grant application would be for $80,000, the 73.33%, and the city share would be $36,000. The project is currently in the 2020 budget or financial plan at $71,900 for a like-for-like replacement, and that's a funding shortfall of $44,100. But if the grant application is successful, $35,900 of surplus funds could be reallocated to other city priorities. And this next section is over at Bevan Park. Our leisure pool has 2 air handling units. They're referred to as HV3 and HV5, and those are the pictures on the right-hand side there. So they provide ventilation and heating for the leisure pool area. So HV3 air handling unit is nearing its end of life, and HV5 unit is actually in a failed state currently, so definitely needs replacing. And upgrading options that we've discovered through our studies is that a heat recovery dehumidification system will also help resolve condensation issues that we're having in that area, as well as pool surface air quality issues. And the benefits of this project are it will help resolve condensation and air quality issues, and potentially it should reduce about 85.5% of the greenhouse gas emissions from current operations. And if the grant is successful, it will allow the city to undertake this project as well. So financial details for this project are the estimated cost is $945,400. The grant application, if successful, is $686,840, and the city share would be $258,560. Replacement of HV5 is currently in the 2020 budget for $210,224. If the project is selected by council, the 2020 to 2024 financial plan would have to be amended to allocate $48,336 from the emissions reduction reserve towards this project. And if successful, the scope and timing of this project would need to be reevaluated as well. And I'll just turn the last section over to Michelle.
Okay, so next steps. We are looking for council resolution to proceed with the application for one of these projects. And then I also wanted to provide a bit of a status update. I believe in the last grant presentation, we had mentioned there being a COVID-19 resilience stream. Right now, that is being put on hold because of the provincial election, so they will not continue to move this grant program forward until a new cabinet has been sworn in. So we'll be waiting a little while, I guess, to hear about that one.
All things come to those who wait.
Yeah.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Through your staff of May. Three questions I have which weren't in the report. Which one saves more money in operations? Which one saves more greenhouse gas emissions? And which one saves more greenhouse gas emissions per dollar saved?
Swipe that back down.
Your Worship, to answer the question to Council Turley.
I'm Bonner
Or,
today.
sorry, Bonner, sorry. Sorry. The Bevan Park, which is the larger project, will actually save considerably more energy as well as greenhouse gas emissions. And third part of your question was?
Well, I mean, per each one, I'm guessing that probably answers my third question, but I'm trying to figure out, I can see the grants and how much we're going to cost and all that sort of thing, but I just want to know how much greenhouse gas emissions we'll be able to reduce per dollar that we save. So, in terms of the operations.
Yeah, Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner. Right? I don't actually have the actual dollar value. I don't have the report in front of me, but it does quantify that it's about 85%, as I mentioned, and I would actually have to go and find out from the report the dollar value for that.
And my point there is I don't know what 85% is.
Right.
of sort of thing. So that's what I'm trying to, like, I like both the projects. I'm kind of leaning towards the Bevan one, but I don't know if it's a better deal to get the Oliver Woods one because we'll be taking more greenhouse gas emissions out of the atmosphere. Or is the other one the better deal? Now, you're telling me, I'm guessing probably Bevan Park would take more greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere.
Your worship and Councillor Bonner, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the much larger project consumes quite a bit more energy, and with the proposed solution, it's re-injecting through the dehumidification process most of the energy that it recovers right back into the space, which is a much larger benefit to the facility.
Okay.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had one answer to my question, or to a question about the GHG reductions. My other piece is kind of a strategic or philosophical one. When we see these federal granting programs, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but as a city, do we tend to have more success with the smaller asks because they're smaller and therefore easier to fund? Or are big infrastructure projects kind of the bread and butter of these funding offers?
Your worship, Councillor Hemmons, actually, I'm not sure finance might be able to better answer that question.
And I'm not sure if it even has an answer per se, but it's just these are things that I think we should be thinking about our chances of success if we choose one or over the other.
Right. Sure.
It's actually a little bit hard to say, because it really depends what everybody else is also applying for, because they're going to get hundreds of applications across, and it's kind of what everybody else has asked for and how much money that, they're allocating to all the other communities. So we've had luck with both. We've had luck with really big projects getting a lot of money, and we've had luck with smaller asks. I think a big thing is how well your project fits into the criteria. Both of these projects actually fit quite well into the criteria. I mean, you could probably say that with a lower amount, your chances are a bit better, but it's not to say that you wouldn't have as good of a chance with a higher one. It's really hard to say. It really depends on what everybody else is applying for and how much everybody else is asking for, because they do need to essentially get rid of their money in this grant program.
Okay, thank you. And acknowledging that was a bit of a tricky question.
Yeah.
I'd like to move recommendation 2, if it's appropriate to do that.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Questions, discussion? Councillor Gesselbrock?
I support recommendation 2. I think that, we're in a need to reduce our carbon emissions, wherever we can and by the most possible. And option 2 gives us that route. And if we're successful, we stand to gain a lot more financially as well. So thank you.
Go big or go home. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And as an earlier meeting discussion, I'm not always convinced that go big or go home is a wise strategy. I'm not going to vote against the motion, but I personally would have preferred option 1. It's a smaller ask. If successful, it would allow us to use some of our funds for other projects. Whereas option 2, even if we're successful, we're still going to have to dip into reserves to fund this, if I'm reading the report correctly. So my preference would have been option 1, but I think they're both good projects. So if the will of council is option 2, I'll support it. Thanks.
Councillor Bonner and then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship. And I'll support the Bevan Park as well. Further to my earlier questions, I appreciate great reports. As you just said, this piece I think is missing is how much physical greenhouse gas in weight are we going to be reducing? And what is our ongoing costs to actually run the new equipment? And I would say that would be a less of an issue to me in terms of making a decision. But I don't know if item 2 is actually way more expensive to run than it is now. So I don't have that information. So that's kind of what I'm looking for I'm sure these will be coming up again, so if it's okay with that.
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, I believe that it is much less. Currently, right now, we're only operating off of one HV unit. And then one of them, apparently the way that it was designed, has a horrible access issues, which isn't allowing us to service it as well as we could be. Is that correct? Yeah, yeah. So I believe that there is a lot of opportunity to reduce GHGs and be operationally more efficient as well, is my understanding.
Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Turley.
I'll be voting for the motion. I think it's better bang for the dollar totally as well, even with the gas reductions. I think that's something that they will look at, which is better for the environment. And I believe it's the Bevan, and it's a savings of $745,000 versus 30-some thousand. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Normally, I'd agree with Councillor Thorpe on this, but I'm looking at the figures and the fact that HV5 has failed, and once again, I see HV3 is nearing the end of its life. Well, I remember when that place was built, so I have a little trouble with that. I prefer needs replacement, if you might want to make a note of that. The challenge, in my opinion, is we've already going to have to replace HV5 regardless of what we vote for, because it's not working. And HV3 is having issues, so for a financial point of view, it makes absolutely total sense to go big or go home. Normally, I wouldn't say that, but, so I support number 2.
Seeing no other speakers, all those in favor of the motion? Sorry. Councillor Brown? In favor or opposed?
I'm in favor, Your Worship.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. The next is the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program. Ms. Mercer?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the city has another opportunity to apply for grant funding through the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program stream. So this grant stream was developed to help communities in BC recover from the economic impacts from COVID-19. So this grant stream was only announced a couple of weeks ago, and it has a really tight deadline of October 29th for application. So we rushed this one to get it in front of you because we wanted to take advantage of some grant opportunities for 2 projects. So I will turn it over to Ms. Miller and Mr. Groot, and they will give you the details on the grant stream as well as the projects, the 5 projects that have been put forward. Thank you.
Ms. Miller?
I'm back. So like Laura said, there's a new grant. It's been a really quick turnaround to get this one out. It's the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program. This is focused on helping communities in British Columbia recover from economic impacts experienced from COVID-19. What the government has done is committed $100 million, and they're wanting to provide 100% project funding up to $1 million. And because it's 100% project funding, there's no stocking rules that apply. One other thing I should mention is that we can submit 2 applications under this grant program, not 1. So project eligibility. Eligible projects will create new employment or re-employ laid-off workers in applicant communities. There's 4 key streams in this program. The first one is community economic resilience, and what this is looking for is short-term, small-scale infrastructure projects. They're going to be geared towards revitalizing outdoor recreation, parks, washrooms, and downtown areas. It's providing additional space for social distancing, improving emergency preparedness, and upgrading public buildings. The second stream is destination development. This is for projects that will hopefully bring visitors back to BC. It is for new or enhanced tourism infrastructure and attractions, This is including things such as interpretive, cultural, or tourism welcome centers, tourism causeways, construction for destination trails, and event facilities. Also, tourism products and amenities that improve visitor experiences, such as wayfinding, interpretive, and First Nations signage, washroom facilities, lighted pathways, etc. The third one is unique heritage infrastructure. This is projects that conserve, repair, rehabilitate, or develop cultural heritage infrastructure, such as cultural heritage sites, landscapes, trails, heritage structures, facilities that support cultural heritage documentary, facilities that house and safeguard cultural heritage materials and belongings. And then finally, the fourth one is rural economic recovery, and that's building necessary infrastructure to support local industries, diversify, and attract new investment. It's also supporting the retention and expansion of existing local businesses. These projects, even themselves, have a tight timeline. They must be started by December 31st, 2021, and be completed by March 31st, 2023. And as Laura mentioned, the application deadline is October 29th, 2020. So we've come with 5 projects that we think meet this criteria. The Loudon Boathouse, we think that this fits into the community economic resilience stream. It's a short-term, small-scale infrastructure project. It revitalizes outdoor recreation, parks, washrooms, and it's an upgrade to a public building. We also think that it fits into the destination development stream. It's a tourist amenity that's improving a visitor experience through upgraded washrooms, facilities, accessibility improvements, and it's an expansion project. The second one is the Bebin Complex electrical upgrades. This project, we think, falls under the community economic resilience stream, as it's improving our emergency preparedness. The third one is Rotary Bowl track replacement. We believe that this fits into the community economic resiliency stream because it's a short-term, small-scale infrastructure project and it's revitalizing outdoor recreation. We also think that through track meets, it could also fit into the destination development stream by, it's a tourism amenity that can improve visitor experience. The fourth project is Maffeo Sutton Playground Phase 2. Same thing, we think it fits into the community economic resilience stream as it's a short-term, small-scale infrastructure project that revitalizes outdoor recreation, park, and downtown areas. And again, we think it also fits into the destination development stream as it's a tourist amenity that will improve visitor experience. And finally, the Maffeo Sutton washrooms, and we believe that this also fits into the community economic resilience stream as it's a short-term, small-scale infrastructure project that revitalizes outdoor recreation, park, washrooms, and downtown areas. And I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Groot, who is going to explain these projects in a little bit more detail.
Mr. Groot, good evening.
Thanks, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council. Make sure I know how to use this. Yeah, so let's just go through each of the projects and we'll just talk about some of the highlights, and you can ask questions along the way or we can wait till the end, however you'd like to do that. So Loudon Boathouse, a project that we're currently working through design on, and we had planned to be in front of council this fall to just provide an update. As you recall, it was a project that was supported from a design perspective late last year for this year's plan. We're working in partnership with the Long Lake Flatwater Training Center Society and the Rotary Club of Nanaimo North. And then for the 50 years of Rotary's anniversary in 2022, the project could fit really quite nicely with a legacy project for that. The amenities for the proposed improvements include making the space larger, which would allow for the secure storage of the boats that they have, some offices for the 2 clubs, enhanced men's and women's public washrooms, including accessible washrooms and some little change rooms. And like the bullet says there, secured boat storage, multi-purpose space, including a small kitchen and a folding partition, which would allow for events, private washroom and double shower room for the clubs, and then of course mechanical and electrical rooms. You can see there we're working on the concepts with our architectural consultant right now. And on the right-hand side, that is the siding similar to what the Loudon Park Improvement Plan speaks to. Financial details, estimated construction cost about $1.87 million. The grant application, obviously $1 million. City share would be $0.87 million to be funded from Gas Tax Community Works Fund. And then, of course, the goal by the clubs is to also try to fundraise as much as possible. And so that would help offset the city's contribution. It's currently not included in the 2020-2024 financial plan. And if it is selected tonight, it would be added to 2021 and 2022 in the 21 to 25 financial plan, contingent on successful grant application. I'll just keep going for the choices if you'd like to do it that way. So the benefits, it provides updated and accessible year-round public washroom and change room, enhanced storage, dry floor and program space for recreation, improved security, safety, and accessibility for all the users, and of course for the public that access the public spaces, enhanced year-round programming for all ages and abilities, and it meets the objectives of the Loudon Park Improvement Plan. The next project that we've selected for the stream is the Bevan Complex electrical upgrades. So the main electrical substation for Bevan Park is nearing its end of usefulness, I won't say end of life. Bevan Park is a designated reception center for residents displaced in the event of emergency. So the current backup power that we have, it only deals with emergency lighting, and that's really it. So the upgrade would include the site prep for future generators that can provide a more complete backup power for cooling, ventilation, mechanical, and heating. So there's the photo of Bevan Complex and a little bit of a line drawing as well. Financial details, estimated design and construction cost about 1.72, and then the grant application $1 million, city share 0.72. It's currently in the 2020 to 2024 financial plan, so the successful application would allow $1 million of city funds currently to be allocated to other priorities. The benefits, upgrade will be more energy efficient. The city of Nanaimo becomes a more resilient community in regards to emergency management, and our capacity to meet requirements under the local authority emergency management regulation is increased. Rotary Bowl track replacement was originally a project slated for about 2024. And then what we did in the planning this year was we split the oval and the sprint track into two separate projects just based on levels of degradation between the two. So the levels of degradation on the sprint track were higher than the oval, so we wanted to bring the sprint track forward. But what this project actually does, or this grant does, it allows us to do both in one go, right? So the 8 lanes of the 400-meter running track, the 8-lane sprint runway, 2-lane long triple jump runways, the pole vault runway, and then a high jump oval area. Current track condition presents a safety hazard if no remediation done. So you can see some spot repairs and some damage, and then on the right-hand side, some roots that were causing damage, and we're doing another round of root remediation at the track right now as well. The financial details, estimated in design construction, $1.2 million. Less than $1 million of the grant is $0.2 million for city share. It's currently in the draft plan. And so the oval portion of the track replacement would be accelerated from 24 to 21 if the grant was successful. So there's a really nice aerial. And then you can see that at the top of the picture there, that's the sprint track. And its level of degradation is much more significant than the oval generally, but the oval itself is definitely needing to be replaced at latest by 2024. So this grant would be really great for this amenity. Successful application would allow for $1 million of city funds currently budgeted towards this project to be reallocated to other priorities. And then an economic driver is attracting participants for track meets. And we've had discussions with the track club, And they're definitely hopeful that with a project like this moving forward, the ability to host provincial and potentially national events would become a realization based on the new condition of the track. Maffeo Sutton Playground Phase 2, so we had a really great completion of Phase 1 this year and a really great council-supported opening. So Phase 2 of 3 phases of park redevelopment. So the inclusive play for 5 to 12-year-olds was completed this year in June. Phase 2 is inclusive play features for 2 to 5-year-olds. And then Phase 3 is a water play zone and connections to Swailana Lagoon. Phase 2, it invites inclusion and sensory appeal to all children, people with disabilities, caregivers, and seniors. In addition to traditional play elements, the inclusivity elements would be musical and audible play, sensory panels, quiet play spaces, and plantings. Themed and artistic layers to link the playground to traditional territories in Sisseton, Newcastle Island. So we saw the introduction of the artistic piece in Phase 1, and it was a really great success. So there we can see the layout of kind of we see Phase 1 in the middle there, and then Phase 2 and Phase 3. Financial details estimated about $663,000, so that's what the grant application would be. Currently, it is in year 2023 of the financial plan, so if selected, it would be accelerated to 2021, and it's contingent on the successful grant application. Benefits: inclusive play is a best practice to create meaningful play environment for people of all ages and abilities. And then if the grant application is successful for maximum funding, the city could reallocate funding for expediting Phase 3 or another priority project. And then Maffeo Sutton washrooms. So the washrooms we have down there, they have a lifespan. They serve a purpose currently, but in 2008, 9, 10, there was a planning process that was undertaken for the expansion and improvement of washroom amenity building. So that's what this would help kind of reintroduce. It was identified during the Maffeo Sutton Park Master Plan process. The original concept was to include a concession, festival-sized washrooms, event storage, and covered exterior seating is what that's supposed to say. Unless we're really barbecuing a lot, and that would work too. So site has already been serviced for the construction of a new facility, so the sewer water is there. Financial details, again, $1 million is what we would apply for through the grant. It's currently not included in the financial plan. The project was originally costed at $1.89 million, but we'd have to just revisit the programming requirements that were created 12 years ago to see how that meets the current needs of the park and the area. So the benefits support the concept plan identified in the Maffeo Sutton Park Master Plan, and it further improves Nanaimo's premier waterfront park space. Next steps. Okay. Do you want to do questions? We'll do questions first.
I have a question. I don't wish to be unkind, but both the previous report and this report are a little shy on guidance for council. And I'm just wondering if you are prepared to give us your 2 out of 5.
My 2 out of 5. I would worry that my 2 out of 5, I have a personal attachment to that somewhat. So I don't know that I can professionally give. Well,
I was going to say, you should be on this side of the...
Yeah, I brought the jacket
Wonderfully
for you.
political, yeah. All right, ignore the question. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Everybody knows my job is building websites, and so running the city through a council that's not a great skill set. However, every once in a while, I do bring a skill set that actually works, and I have over 14 years in grant allocations fundings through the United Way, and I have read literally hundreds of grant applications, and actually for the city as well. There's a thing we say in these grant applications, it's called "that's a stretch." where they're trying to take a program and fit it into a funding stream. And it doesn't really work, but it's argued that way. And generally, they're not very successful. And with all due respect to staff and the amount of time they put into this report, I'm reading through the project funding streams on their website, and it's fairly specific. They're looking for COVID things to fix. And all of the examples speak to expanding an area, widening a trail, making things bigger so there's more space to do social distancing, and that's throughout all of the examples. The Loudon Boat Project is probably the closest one, I'm thinking, and that might fit in here, but again, it's a stretch because that thing was designed pre-COVID, and I can guarantee you that the washrooms aren't wide enough. There's probably, even the one that we're looking at now, the Maffeo Sutton, is there 2 entrances to the washrooms? Are they big enough now? I think what we've done is what's happened is this grant funding stream has appeared out of nowhere, and we're trying to pigeonhole some applications that we think might work. So I'm not sure they really qualify for what the province is asking for. Not that I'm saying we shouldn't try it anyway, but I'm curious as to the success of the applications that might go in there. So I'll speak more to it later if we want to go into each one of the individuals, which we'll probably end up doing, but that's my 2 cents here.
We're just at the question stage before we go on to the next step. So, Councillor Turley?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to clarify a couple things on the Loudon, what was first called Boathouse, but the committee from Rotary is currently discussing it with Paddling Group and City, I believe, to change the name to Loudon Paddling Center, which is more realistically describes what actually goes on there. I also would like to add that when it was presented to the last one, we did not at that time know, but since found out through the Paddling Group, that First Nations, Sanemo, do take advantage of the use of the facilities there for their practice runs. I'd also like to point out that the plan from the paddling groups is to actually hold regattas, so it would be definitely falling within the tourism regime. And the Rotary Club in Nanaimo North has committed $100,000 to this project. The paddling groups are committing more money, and then there will be additional fundraising happening as well. So I can't remember, Art, you might be able to let me know when the actual final design was completed. I didn't think it was that long ago, but.
Through your worship to Councillor Turley. So the design's probably at about 50% right now. So the concept that you saw is kind of where we got to with the architects around that piece. But then both groups, the Rotary representative and the Flatwater representative, both agreed in principle to use that to move forward. So essentially you could say that that design discussion currently is completed, and then everything else is evolving out of that. So it won't change too much aesthetically or from a footprint perspective.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about that so much as what Councillor Bonner referred to with challenges with the washroom and spacing.
Yeah, the timeline for that was within the last month or two, that we actually sat with the representatives from Flatwater and Rotary and the architectural consultant to kind of get that final, let's use that as the basis point for the 50% design to move forward with. So that's happened within the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Is it all right to move a motion?
I think they're anxious to go, Mr. Group.
I got all night.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I would like to move that we apply for the Loudon Boathouse.
Seconded? Second, Councillor Martman.
And to speak to it, I think it does hit some of the things when you look at it, because you could argue that regattas would be a destination to get more people coming here. So I think it hits that, and I understand what Councillor Bonner says too, because having sat on grant applications as well, you always do look to see how do they fit. So I could say you could do that as a destination development, as well as economic resiliency too, because we are going to be employing more people. So for those reasons, I think that one fits. And then I have another one after, but I'll wait till everybody else has their chance. Thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. It's one out of, before hearing what everybody had to say, that was one of the two. I just think there's so many benefits to the community. But to Councillor Bonner, when I interpreted in reading this, that although it's related to COVID, it's more about the economic impacts experienced by communities, and this is about putting money back into the community and in our infrastructure. But we are competing not only against municipalities, but Indigenous applicants and not-for-profit organizations. But just adding that, but definitely I support Loudon.
Councillor Hemmons. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. The boathouse wasn't one of my first picks, but I'm willing to support it if we change the name. Just something about the boathouse during the times of the pandemic and the inequality we're experiencing in our communities. It just seems to come across the wrong way. So I like Councillor Turley's suggestion of the paddling center or some other creative name. Thanks.
Councillor Hemmons, do you wish to speak now?
Yeah, thank you, I will. So it wasn't in my top two, and so I won't be voting in support. And part of my rationale, I won't tell you my top choice, I'll try to move that, but my second choice is the Bebin electrical upgrades, and my rationale for that is that it's something we need to do. It's already on the books, and if it's funded, then we have a surplus, that we know that we're always going to need excess money in upgrades, and, keeping our infrastructure running. So I'm a huge fan of the Loudon Paddling Center concept, but I would prefer to see something that we already have on the books that's going to actually save us some money in the long run, because I think that is responsible. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner, do you wish to speak to the first motion? Or?
Sure, if you don't mind.
I'm not encouraging you to do so. I'm trying to roll the meeting along. If you want to, please.
I'll speak quickly. I asked a question regarding, since stacking is not a rule anymore on this particular grant fund, what other streams has the city looked for to pick up the extra 800,000? Yes.
We were going to fund it from the Community Works Fund, the Gas Tax Community Works Fund grant money that we receive biannually. So it's another level of government funding that it's unconditional. We receive it 2 times a year, and we would use that money for it.
I got that part, but does the stacking ever refer to that fund, that you can't use that fund with other grants? Or is it just that happens to be there?
Well, stacking rules usually apply when they'll only fund up to a maximum percentage. So for that last one, they'll only fund up to 73%. So they're saying that the government is only willing to pay 73% of that project, whereas this one is 100% funded. So the only reason why we would use some of our own money is because the project is over $1 million. Otherwise, they'd be paying for it all. So no stacking rules really apply there.
Well, yeah, but I was wondering, is there another funding stream that we could apply for to pick up the other 800,000? I know we already have money in the bank from the gas tax.
Like another grant program?
Yeah, anything.
Not that I could think of off the top of my head, but that's something that could always... Usually if it's a government grant program, we would already know about it, but there might be some private grant programs that would provide for that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that's open at the moment that doesn't have stacking rules. It's very rare that you have a grant program with 100% funding. It's another grant program, they would have stacking rules to it, which would not let us use this grant money for that, and vice versa.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question to the Bebin electrical upgrades. I must say that was sort of one that I was...
If we're on a motion to deal with the.
Well, and it's going to
boathouse,
affect my vote for sure, depending on the answer I get here. So I would say that it's related.
I'll let you do it.
Okay. I'm just, my question is how closely does that fit into the granting criteria, that particular one? Or is that sort of a bit more of a stretch compared to the boathouse?
That was the Bevan one that
The
you were asking
Bevan
about?
Electric
I think it fits into the grant criteria. One of the ones it specifically identifies with emergency preparedness, which I think that directly fits into that.
Councillor Turley. All right, then
Okay.
Councillor Thorpe, or do you want?
I'll just quickly say something then. With regard to streams of funding for the paddling center, Rotary is very enthusiastic, as are the paddling groups, to fund this portion of it. As I mentioned, we already have committed $100,000 to it. And the other advantage that the Rotary Club in particular has is that we have access to other sources of funding that municipal governments generally wouldn't have, through private corporations, that type of thing. So I'm quite optimistic that the Rotary Clubs itself can come up with a couple $100,000, and I can't speak for the paddling groups, but I know they're willing to work their tails off to raise money as well. So I'm not convinced that we'd be looking for $800,000 in addition to the grant. There's already funding opportunities there, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very quickly, 3 of these projects made my short list, and of course, they're all worthwhile, but in my view, the paddling center project was number 1, and so I'll definitely be supporting the motion. And I think I heard Mr. Groot indicate that it probably ticked more of the boxes than any of the other projects. And if I'm misquoting him, Mr. Groot can jump up and down and tell me so, but I'm not seeing that. So I will support it. Thank you.
All those in favor? Contrary? Councillors Hemmens and Gesselbrock. Councillor Brown? Councillor Brown, are you in favor or opposed? Well, this doesn't sound very promising.
Your Worship?
Yes, in favor or opposed to the Loudon Boathouse?
I would like to speak to it, actually.
We've had the vote, actually. Were you absent for a minute or two?
No, I've been trying to speak up. I don't know if the connection is working.
Ms. Gurry, what's the appropriate thing to do?
Your Worship, I think it's a judgment call because he is online and there was some lagging there, so you could allow him to speak and then reconfirm the vote.
Yes. All right, go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I'm actually not necessarily opposed to this project, but I am opposed to the funding source being community work funds. I think that without any context provided in this report of what potential other capital projects are impacted by that, that's a pretty steady source of funding for us that can be used fairly wisely. So I think it's unwise to
Thank you. All right, I'm going to call the vote again. All those in favor? Councillors Bonner, Armstrong, Thorpe, Krog, Martman, and Turley. And opposed, Councillors Hemmens, Gesselbrock, and Councillor Brown. What say you?
Opposed.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. All right, one more kick at the cat. What's the next favorite? Councillor Hemmens?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move the third option regarding the Rotary Bull track replacement.
Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Just to speak to it.
Sure, I'll briefly. Anything that is about supporting children having healthy lives I think is something this council should get behind, because, you know, the other end of that, you said it, children in care, like, we're seeing all sorts of social challenges, and I think the more we can nurture that next generation coming up, and I mean, I can speak personally, sporting was my life, and it just gave me a lot, and I can see that happening for other youth, no matter their income, no matter their access to paddling centers. This is something that all high schools go to every year, and I just think it's about equity, so I'm happy to support this.
Very good. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I'll pass.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I'm 100% in favor of this as well, and I also wanted to make note that a lot of our seniors use this track, especially those that have had knee or hip replacements, because it's a level surface and it's got some rubbery, well, softness, so it's the less impact, I guess is the better term. I also think, again, when you look at it from a destination perspective, which is I'm, you know, looking at their grant things there, we do host a lot of track and field meets here, and right now with the condition of our track, I don't know if we'd be eligible for some of those. So I do see it, and I also see it as exactly like Councillor Hammond said. It's a way for people to get outside, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. Even if you don't have a good pair of runners, you can still go out and use it. Whereas a lot of our other sporting events cost a lot of money. So I'm 100% in favor of that.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. When, I'm not sure if this, you can answer this, well, I hope you can, is, are we making the track wider to account for some sort of social distancing?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, no, we are not. It's 8 lanes. I mean, you could probably, I would say, change how you run the races so that only every second lane or something is taken in.
Okay.
Maybe they'll outrun the virus. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, yes, I think this is a very strong project. I just had a couple of questions, though. First of all, I agree with Councillor Armstrong. This is a real economic driver in our community, and I think back to the times we've hosted the summer games and the people that we've had visiting our community and the use this track gets year to year. One thing, though, it says in the report, and I'm quoting, "It is assumed that little to no maintenance has been performed." That's referring to since 2010. I'm a bit disappointed that we don't have that clarified, because I'm sure a call to the track club. I know the surface has been redone at least twice. I'm not saying since 2010, but over the course of the rubberized track, since we got rid of the cinder track many, many years ago. And the second thing is, it also indicates later in the report that the track club in town, Nanaimo Track and Field Club, has committed to contributing $50,000, and I would just like that confirmed, and maybe just elaborate on conversations you've had with the track club and their take on this. I don't know if Mr. Groot's in a better position to comment on that.
Through your worship to Councillor Thorpe, I do believe we've received a letter from the Track and Field Club confirming that they have $50,000 to contribute to this project. Like Art had mentioned, we put the sprint track in the budget for 2021, and that is what we were putting that $50,000 towards, regardless whether this project goes through for the grant application or not.
Thank you, and that's fine, and good for them.
Yeah.
And I think, as much as anything else, I just want to acknowledge that prior to the city taking over with a co-management agreement with the track club itself has done a lot of work over the years in trying to maintain the track and improve it, put in lighting and so on. So kudos to them, and I'm glad that with this grant application, we can hopefully support them further. Thanks.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. This wasn't on my top two. Actually, the Maffeo Sutton washrooms was my other pick, mostly because I think they could really be improved. I noticed that for the Rotary Bowl, we actually had it in our budget. So if we were successful in the grant, we could take that $1 million and then maybe we could decide to upgrade the Maffeo Sutton. So I would support it. Thank you.
I think Councillor Martman just laid down her marker. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. You know, I definitely support getting children out exercising and participating in wholesome activities wherever possible. And I grew up running around that track. However, I do think that first things first, and I think the electrical upgrades, they're going to save energy, and most importantly, it's going to make our community more resilient in terms of emergency management. And I think that when you need that type of infrastructure in, you definitely really count on it. So I can't support the track upgrades at this point, and think that the Bevan Complex electrical upgrades would be a much more wise investment. Thanks.
Well, Councillor Gesselbrock, I have to say that I might well have agreed with you, but Councillor Hemmons made such an extraordinarily first-rate argument in favor of the track that I'm going to vote in favor of the track. All those in favor? Councillor Brown, in favor or opposed? Sorry?
I'm opposed.
Opposed? And who's opposed? Councillors Gesselbrock and Brown. Thank you. Well done. Thank you very much. Ms. Miller, Mr. Groot. Appreciated. Ms. Mercer, property tax exemption bylaw for 2021 property taxes.
Yes, so hopefully this will be quicker than the last ones, but the community charter identifies situations in which council may exercise discretion in granting full or partial exemptions from taxation, and the permissive tax exemptions are one of those ways in which you can do that. This bylaw must be adopted by October 31st of every year, so we're here to provide you with the bylaw for adoption. In making recommendations to council, staff as the reviewers ensure, among other things, that the goals and policies of the general operating principles of the municipality as a whole are reflected in the organizations that receive municipal support. Exemptions are not given to services that are otherwise provided on a private for-profit basis, as this would be unfair competition. Competitive advantage, and the services provided by the organization should provide benefits and be accessible to the residents of the city of Nanaimo. And in the appropriate age range, the organization's regulations must allow all Nanaimo residents to participate at a reasonable fee. So all of the organizations that are included in this bylaw meet all of these criteria, and so for this year, we have added 7 properties and we've removed 7 properties. The Clay Tree Society, Nanaimo Community Garden Society, Island Crisis Care Society, Society for Equity, Inclusion and Advocacy, the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society, the Vancouver Island Mental Health Society, and the Nanaimo Unique Kids Organization were all added. I will say that the Vancouver Island Mental Health Society at 285 Rose Hill and the Nanaimo Unique Kids Organization at 60 Needham Street, they were on the bylaw last year. They have now owned their properties, and that change in ownership required them to reapply. So you will see them on last year's and this year's. The 7 properties that were removed, the trustees of the congregation of the Brechin United Church, and that property was repurposed. The Island Corridor Foundation at 0 Port Drive, that looks like it was amalgamated, they amalgamated some portfolios. And then 3 organizations that were at 285 Prideaux Street. So the Mid-Island Métis Association, the Mid-Island Intergroup Society, and the Nanaimo Citizens Advocacy Association, as well as the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. So there was 4, are all no longer in that building. And the Nanaimo Women's Resource Society was also removed. So we have 110 organizations representing 164 properties listed in the bylaw. And the 2020 value of all of these properties was just a little over 1.4 million. So these values are calculated on the space that each of these organizations use on any given property, and if they occupy the whole building, all of the taxes relate to their organization. So that is all I'm going to say on that. If there's any questions, I will gladly answer.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. To you, to Ms. Mercer. I'm just questioning the Brechin United Church because I thought when they we had a presentation some time ago that part of the building was going to be dedicated for a chapel for services. Has that changed, or?
I am not sure on that. They would have to,
I'm assuming if,
We'd have to
once the
look at
building is done, then they would.
once everything's
reapply?
done,
Okay.
we would have to have them reapply
Right.
because the use of that property has changed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Does someone care to make the recommended motion? Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Bonner.
Your worship, would the acting mayor, who isn't here in person, so maybe perhaps Councillor Bonner would wish to read out the bylaw?
Councillor Bonner.
Today.
Doesn't bother me.
Yeah, that property tax exemption bylaw 2020 number 7315 to provide exemption from 2021 property taxes pass first reading.
Seconded. All those in favor? Contrary, Councillor Brown?
In favor.
In favor, very good, it passes. Councillor Bonner?
That property tax exemption bylaw 2020 number 7315 pass second reading.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Councillor Brown?
In favor.
In favor. Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Councillor Bonner?
That property tax exemption bylaw 2020 number 7315 pass third reading.
Seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? I assume you're in favor, Councillor Brown? And likewise,
That's correct.
Councillor Gesselbrock? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is property disposition, 350 and 398 Frankton Street. Mr. Lindsay. A good deal for the city.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council. I'll be very quick, because I think Council's familiar with this property and this proposal, but certainly this starts back with the property disposition, as mentioned, of 350 and 398 Franklin, and we're here this evening to receive Council's approval for the disposition of the subject property to So Good Property Limited for $1.216 million. Your Worship, Council may recall, is back in December of last year that Council authorized the purchase of 431 Dunsmuir and 425 Wesley Street, which are the parking lots immediately adjacent to the SARC building, just to the south of the SARC building. Because of that purchase, it made these lands surplus. And then in May of this year, Council directed us to proceed with a request for offers proposal. Those offers were received, and they were ultimately evaluated by Council. And at your meeting in August, you authorized that the purchase and sale agreement with So Good Properties, that staff proceed with that purchase and sale agreement. So here this evening to report back that that's been completed, and again seeking Council's authorization to proceed with disposition for $1.216 million. The property will transfer in on the 22nd of this month, and the funds will go back into your property sales fund, which will be available for future purchases. Certainly happy to answer any questions, Your Worship.
Councillor Bonner.
Oops, sorry.
Yep. If no questions, I would ask that someone make the appropriate motion. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Brown approving, I assume?
In favor.
Excellent, thank you. Motion carries. Well done. The next is building permit function review. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask our Director of Development Approvals, Mr. Holm, to come forward and just introduce this report to you.
We approve. Mr. Holm, welcome to the cleanest podium in town.
Yeah, he's done a great job. I'm here to thank you, Your Worship and Council, for allowing me to speak with you this evening about a project that I'm really excited about. We're looking at undertaking a review of the building permit function, and that work, I guess through this, we want to highlight how challenging work in that area is, and I'm sure you're all well aware of the volume of work that has been happening in that area. The area is constantly evolving, impacted by many external factors, changes to legislation, building code, provincial requirements for the qualifications of building officials that are quite challenging for staff to adjust to and to train to meet those requirements, as well as just the general volume of development activity that we've experienced, especially recently. So we do adjust processes and procedures in the department regularly to adjust to external factors that are impacting our approvals, including most recently, obviously, COVID-19 pandemic declaration and shifting building permit applications to online processes very rapidly. Those shifts and changes are obviously challenging for staff and as well as our applicants to adjust to at times, and there can be impacts to efficiency and timeliness of permit application approvals. Obviously, efficient and timely permit approvals are very important to our customers, to the economy and the building industry as a whole, but to homeowners and business owners and the like. So we're taking an opportunity to build on some review, some other work that's been done in the past, and in the vein of continuous improvement, in the interest of that, we've engaged Ellen Nielsen of Nielsen Strategies, Inc., to help us out with the review of the building permit function. And so that's getting underway in October, so right away, and we're expecting to be reporting back to the Governance and Priorities Committee in January with a report with some recommendations on sort of just where we're at, a comparison, some outcomes of interviews with industry representatives, homeowners, business owners, with staff as well, and to do a comparison with other municipalities and look at how our approvals processes are doing, and are there any recommended changes, any recommended resource improvements, technology, communication, staffing levels, the like. So it's going to be quite a quick process, but we're really excited to go through it. I've talked to staff about it, obviously, and a lot of them are quite excited to give input, and I'm sure a lot of the development community will be too. And as I mentioned, it builds on work that's been done in the past. So we've had the Development Process Review Committee. Previously, we had the Core Services Review, which completed in 2016. And actually, the Core Services Review at that time identified that our building inspections was operating at a industry best practice standards at that point. Obviously, we want to check back in and see how we're doing. The pace of development is substantial. There's been a lot of changes to the Building Act, to building code revisions, even to provincial or municipal bylaws and policies and the like. So we want to build on some of the work that's been done before and make sure that we're still on track and identify any improvements that can help keep us there. And so that's essentially it. So looking at approval processes, again, staffing levels, the use of technology and communication methods and approaches there. Again, October through January is the timeline. And the basic outcome is just to, again, identify potential changes to permit approval processes and to bring forward recommendations on those. And so happy to take any questions you have, but I'm definitely excited about it. I think the time is right, and we're looking forward to continuously improving.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm, much appreciated. Councillor Armstrong.
No,
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And through you, thank you so much for bringing this to us, because when I'm out in the community, talking to the business community in particular, this has been a subject that's been brought up over and over again, even before I was elected to council. So I think this is very timely. Anything we can do to improve our processes. And I like that we're doing what is comparable in other municipalities, because you hear, but you don't know if it's true, that, well, other municipalities can do this, why can't Nanaimo? And then the other thing, please really review those staffing levels, because we have fantastic staff. And so my first thought when we can't do things fast enough is that we need to add more staff. It's not about the staff not working hard, it's about needing more staff. So I'm happy to see that's going to be included in it as well. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Did you want to say something?
If I could, thank you, yeah, sure. Through your worship, too, thank you for highlighting the staff and the work that they do. We're very fortunate to have a very skilled, competent staff. We've got staff with a lot of experience, very technically competent, and we've been very fortunate to be able to bring in some newer staff, some junior staff that are quite skilled and bringing a lot to the organization. It's a challenge in many municipalities to even just to attract and retain qualified professionals in the building field, building officials. So I appreciate you recognizing that, and we're definitely going to continue doing what we can to attract and retain the staff that we have and make sure that they're doing doing the best to do the good work they do in the community, and they're supported in doing that. Thanks.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Mr. Holt. Do many of the building permit application plans include an engineering stamp from a private engineering firm? Is there an approximate percentage of plans that you get that are approved by an engineering firm versus not?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the type of permit, but through your worship, generally the complex permit applications, Part 3 buildings especially, would have engineers involved. It's going to depend on the size and the use of the building. Okay. There's certain requirements under the Architects Act and the Building Code for when architects get involved, and then when the number of the other professionals that are involved, and whether or not that would include structural engineering or not. But on the complex building side, it's the majority would include structural engineering.
So my next question is the same amount of, I hate to put it this way, but the same amount of diligence and time applied to ones that have the stamp as opposed to one that don't? In other words, would they get preferential treatment? Although I guess because they're more complex, that it's going to take just as long. But in other words, are you considering a two-stream approach to building permits, one based on having structure or engineering stamps versus ones that come in the back of a piece of paper?
Yeah, we'll be looking at all all different options that we could consider, but there are already requirements in place for a coordinating professional to be involved in overseeing complex buildings, and we do we do rely on, we're required to rely on the services of certain professionals, architects and engineers, especially in many cases with building permits currently. Okay. And on the residential side, the smaller buildings, the 1- and 2-family dwellings, generally there aren't structural engineers involved, although they can be if they're a larger building or a more complicated design that's outside the scope of typical code.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. This is one that I hear about a lot from the community as well. Better part of a year ago, there was a presentation about times for different types of permits, different categories, that sort of thing, and we were way above our projected what we are. How are we now? Are we roughly the same we were back then, or in terms of time it takes to get a permit?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Bonner's question, on the single and 2-family dwelling side, we're close to our targets, so we're doing better on those permits. On the larger, more complex permits, we're around the same timeline. So depending on the permit, 4 to 6 months for the larger, complex buildings. So our timelines haven't changed dramatically on the larger projects from a year ago, but we are doing better on the closer to our targets on the 1 and 2 family dwellings.
And I don't see this as a rather hugely complicated problem. I think everybody knows what's working here. Why are we taking 4 months to do this one? Would that be a standard time? I'm thinking, could be done quicker?
Yeah, part of it's the volume. A lot of it's the volume, really, when it comes down to it. There are also inputs from professionals, review, revision, so it depends on how quickly we can get through the review, how complete it is, and we've got process improvements in place and to try and make sure that we get as complete an application as possible so that we're not doing a lot of back and forth and we can actually get into it and review it. The volume of work is substantial, so time to get actually to the full code review, and then the complexity of the applications is substantial as well. So it's, yeah, I mean, when you look around at some other communities, and we'll get a better idea when we go through this, but those timelines, well, they sound extreme, and we'd always like to do the best we can to reduce them. They're not that far off, and even better than a lot of comparable municipalities. We're going to get into the details on that, and we'll be able to provide you some solid information on that. But it's just the complexity, the volume, and then the back and forth with the revisions and getting it to a stage where it's complete and ready to issue. There's a lot of other factors that go into building permit applications. So often you'll see applications come forward, so they're for a development permit. There's always works and services reviews that need to happen. So there's engineering, there's civil engineering inputs, there's development permit conditions that need to be met before a building permit can be issued. So some of those things can delay issuance as well. So not exactly, they're related, they're peripheral to the building permit application. We collect development cost charges, we secure works and services. All of those things address development permit conditions. Housing agreements are sometimes approved related to a building permit, so before it can be issued. So those are all factors that can add to the timeline.
Yeah, that was actually a really good answer to my next question. I was asking, why is this review taking 4 months to do?
This review.
Yes.
It just, yeah, that's what it's going to take. We've got a good work program that's been developed. We want to give it adequate time, adequate input from industry and from staff, and to be able to bring it forward for earlier in the new year for Governance and Priorities Committee review.
Okay. In one more, if I may. I know
I'm wondering, Mr. Rudolph, do you want to comment now or wait till the third question's asked?
I can, either, whatever. Councillor Bonner's in the middle of his question, so after I can jump in after.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is something I've tossed around a couple of times, and that's a nexus lane. Like, not only we have good staff doing the work in the department, but we also have really good builders out there. Not all of them, but most of them are really and reputable. And I'm wondering if there's the possibility of, in this review, looking at the concept of a nexus lane where certain builders get fast-tracked because of the work they do. They do this in the electrical industry that I know of. Certain electrical contractors will put in a permit and then they'll put in for an inspection. And if the inspector doesn't show up in 3 days, it's done. And so the inspector typically will go to people he doesn't necessarily, or she doesn't necessarily know the good work that they're doing. Having seen this before, I would think that would be something that we would want to include in this review.
Yeah, I can answer that through your worship too. I can speak to that a bit. So it's a preferred builder stream is sort of the concept, and that's something that it has been toyed with before. Generally, what we find is it's administratively challenging. really what it comes down to is a lot of times it's the completeness, the thoroughness of the application. They'll self-select as preferred builders by having a complete application. And so they'll get, so right now the way we're processing permits, if you submit a complete application, the clock starts ticking on the day that it's accepted as complete. If you don't submit a complete application, so we review them. If it's not complete, we give you time to provide the rest of the information that's necessary to complete the application. And the clock won't start ticking on your review until we get a complete application. So there is already sort of that's on the permit review side. On the electrical comparison, you're speaking about inspections. That's a little bit different. We can talk about that. There's some opportunities there that we can look at, and we'll probably explore through this review. But we'll definitely look at all different options.
Okay.
Mr. Rudolph.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just a little bit of context on this. Mr. Nielsen is the same consultant that did the animal control review process. He's actually involved in 4 projects with us this year. So we're actually trying to do business improvement processes in a number of areas. So the first one was the animal control. The second is the sanitation review project, which is what he's currently working on. And then he's transitioning into the building permit review process. When I contacted Mr. Nielsen, if he had experience on this and was interested, because I think we have to have sort of a neutral third-party piece to this to assist the planning department. He said he just completed a review for a larger city in the Lower Mainland. So he said he had a pile of information, and a lot of these questions that you're asking, I think, will be included in his analysis. So I feel we're actually piggybacking on the work that he's been doing in other municipalities and can port that into this exercise. The fourth piece that he's still working on is the tourism function and moving forward with our model. So I think I'm highly confident that the product that we'll get is commensurate with what we saw with the animal control. So we'll have to have a special GPC that'll probably take quite a while in January just to get through this. But it's it's one of apart from the subject of homelessness and social disorder, I suspect it's the single largest email train and meetings that you have in your office is with respect to the timing of permits, and building permits in particular. So it was a targeted area that needs attention, and I am confident that you'll get a modern set of inputs, which is impartial and informed and is totally bought into by the planning department, because they're actually quite enthused about the project. And I think we'll get a good deliverable out of it. He needed, to get back to your question, he needed a couple of months to interview and work his way through some of those other projects. And then there is the Christmas period as well. So we're delivering the project in January. So I think it's probably a pretty quick turnaround.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to hear about this review. I'm looking forward to seeing a good full systemic picture of what goes on. I think it's going to be educational for council and the public to understand sort of the complexity of this entire system, and then also for recommendations how council can support, maybe resourcing items better. For me, I think that the building industry and regulations around it is going to be, it's evolving quickly with implemented the STEP code, and I think that we need to really look at how we can build a responsive system as changes come in, that we can have folks educated and at the same time have it efficient, so that there's a predictability around the process for business consideration. So thanks for bringing this forward, and I look forward to hearing about it. Thanks.
Councillor Turley, did you have one more?
Nope, I don't know.
Thank you. Mr. Holm, thank you very much. I think we're all looking forward to this. And I suspect it's going to perhaps even show what Councillor Martin has suggested, that it's tough to find staff. And as I recall, Mr. Lindsay was trying to corral folks in Costco. But that was before Councillor So made this such a lovely city to work in that they weren't interested. I'm just teasing. The next are bylaws. Officers Appointment and Delegation Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 7031.07. someone make the appropriate motion? I'd normally ask Councillor Brown, but we can't see him, so. Councillor Bonner?
The officers appointed and delegations bylaw amendment bylaw number 2020, number 7031.07, to align the bylaw with a revised management organizational structure be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I assume you're in favor, Councillor Brown?
In favor.
Very much. Councillor Bonner, Management Terms and Conditions of Employment Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7273.01.
That management terms and conditions of employment amendment bylaw 2020 number 7273.01 to reflect changes to align with the officers appointment and delegation bylaw 2006 number 7031 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Brown, yea or nay?
In favor.
In favor, thank you very much. We have a bylaw status sheet for information only. We have no notices of motion. We have no other business. Councillor Martman, second, sorry, Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Worship.
We have
Yes,
to
I think,
recess, properly speaking.
yes, so recess so we can,
Return to the in-camera meeting. Thank you.
that's correct.
Trying to gallop the horse too fast. We will recess briefly and then return to the in-camera portion of the meeting.